Thanks. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. So the presentation today is focusing on a very narrow piece of the broad scope of opportunity around conservation financing. And just a little bit of background around what conservation financing is. It's going beyond the short-term hand-to-mouth funding or treasury funding or project funding that we're used to operating with in the conservation sector. And it's looking at long-term, sustainable, dependable funding that can cover the costs of a program's financial requirements over a longer term. And what we're trying to do as Conservation Finance Africa is, it's probably a bit bold because the registration is probably sitting with the who does the company registrations these days? It's CPIC at the moment. But basically, a group of us have got a little bit frustrated about saying, wouldn't it be nice if we had this financing mechanism as a possibility in South Africa, because we see it all around the world. And what we're trying to do is to set up a purpose-built non-profit company with the express view of exploring all of these innovative conservation financing mechanisms, identifying those that are most relevant and ready for adoption in South Africa, and then setting up the systems and processes and contracts that are required to administer and manage the flow of funding and reporting that's required to make these opportunities a reality. So in that process, we've looked at trying to quantify all the different sustainable financing mechanisms. So if you look at every single one of those points, that's an opportunity, a conservation financing opportunity. And we've got, so we're going to be focusing this presentation just on the broad-based black economic empowerment spend with conservation outcomes. That's not to market the other conservation outcomes. But you can see that there's a huge scope of opportunity in this conservation financing space in terms of mechanisms that are being used around the world. And we need to find what's going to work best for us, for the outcomes that we want to achieve in South Africa. Okay, so don't want to go into the detail of all of that in this presentation. This is purely to focus on the potential opportunity around BEE. So this comes off the back of some partnership with the WWF Land Program, where we're looking at focusing, well, we've got a specific community conservation area which has needs that align with BEE projects around skills development, enterprise development, and socioeconomic development. And we're wanting to try and match that need in the landscape with corporates who have got who want to get BEE points, and I think it's quite exciting that quite a lot of corporates would like to get a conservation outcome or a green outcome from a socioeconomic spend, and they're green at heart, and they want to see their regulated spend have a conservation outcome, not just a social outcome. So we're targeting a specific market segment here, which is the healthcare and pharmaceutical industry, and playing on the link between human health and opportunity to spend time in natural environments. And luckily, there's some really great work that's been done by the World Health Organization and the Convention on Biodiversity and the UNDP around the links between health and biodiversity. And I think everybody kind of can see the link between looking after your body and looking after an ecosystem, being very, very good analogies. So this is just the little brochure that we've put together to approach corporates. But then what we're wanting to do is get into scaling this up in different and broadening this opportunity. So I wanted to just quickly do a little bit of BEE 101. I saw there was some offsets 101 previously with Dave. So for the Aussies in the audience, this is probably something quite new to you. You might have heard about broad-based black economic empowerment, but basically it's a regulated legislation on businesses to conduct their business in a way that's going to address the economic discrepancies or imbalances from our apartheid history. And so there's a national code, or there's national legislation, and then there are a number of business sectors that have got their own sector codes. Those are the sector codes. They're different portions of this legislation apply to different size companies. So you have EMEs, exempt micro enterprises, who have there's not a lot of strict regulation on them. It's they're basically a level, they become a default level 4 enterprise, but then they can apply to improve their status, their BEE status. And then you had qualifying small enterprises, and then the generics are anything over 50 million turnover. Okay, so that's basically a level 1 BEE company is a company that's scoring over 100 points against the BEE codes, and you go down to sort of the lower levels where you're not compliant, and it becomes harder and harder to do business with government or with other large corporates if your BEE rating is anything lower than a level 4. Okay. So recently, in 2015, the codes were revised, and they're just kind of from the original codes in 2009, and those are now there's 5 distinct areas of the BEE codes, and they deal with ownership, management control, skills development, enterprise and supply development, and socio-economic development. And sadly, a lot of bigger established corporates in South Africa are still reluctant to give up white ownership and management control. And so I'm not saying we need to help those guys out, but there's a whole spectrum of sentiment in that space. And there's an opportunity because what we're looking at is projects that can provide the audited outcomes that companies will get points in skills development, enterprise and supply development, and socioeconomic development. So it allows them to focus specifically on those aspects which a lot of companies are more ready to spend their BEE budgets on. So that's on the right in the dark blue is just the current breakdown of that spread of the 109 points. And there are a couple of bonus points up for grabs as well. So we're looking specifically at the skills development component, which deals with skills development spend for black persons, which is not that are not necessarily black employees. So the previous codes was only for black employees. Now it's for black persons. So and so that's for 6. If you want to get those 6 points at the top, you need to put 2.5% of your payroll equivalent number. So if you've got if you employed 100 or 200 people in your company, and you can then fund a learnership, apprenticeship, or internship for 5 people, and then you'll get your 6 points. Okay, as an example. And then there's some bonus points available if those people end up getting employment within your company. And then we've got the enterprise development component. So the enterprise development goes hand in hand with supplier development in the codes, but we've taken that supplier component out because that depends on the company actually has to do business with the company that the entity that they're supporting. So for one, you need to spend 1% of net profit after tax on enterprise development to get 5 points, and then there are 2 bonus points available there. And then the same is for socio-economic development. Spending 1% of your net profit after tax gives you 5 points. So in summary, it gives us a total of 29 points out of 109 that, that companies can earn by doing projects. And what we're saying is that those projects can have conservation outcomes and support conservation projects in the field. So, okay, so the money is out there. So this is just a quick top 5. The top 5 profits in billions of the top 40 companies in the on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. So just to give you an idea in your head of what the big corporates in South Africa are earning in terms of profit. And the benefits for the corporates are that they can get 29 plus, because there are some supplier development, potential supplier development points also available, but with a conservation impact, it provides them opportunity to align with King 3 reporting and Global Reporting Initiative guidelines. These are fantastic brand building opportunities for a lot of corporates. Conservation projects are a great opportunity for engaging employees and providing, getting employees into the field and doing good team building type activities. And depending on their product or service line or their value chain that they do business in, it provides opportunities to get exposure to low income markets and understand low income value chains a bit better. So through cleverly designing community conservation projects, these specified requirements can be met. And then the project would then have to provide that, company with auditable records of all the claimable project spend towards enterprise development, socioeconomic development, and skills development. So this is from the legislation, and basically just to summarize this in the following slide, it's just saying that the payments from the measured entity, the company that's wanting to earn BEE points, those can be made to a third party. So you could have a conservation NGO that's brokering these relationships, and so you have that non-profit company could be receiving BEE payments from a number of corporates and then sending those out to conservation projects and community projects in the landscape, and then reporting back. And yeah, that's the sort of main point I wanted to make, and the direct costs incurred by the measured entity to assist the beneficiaries can also be covered, as well as overhead costs in the process of managing those projects. And again, that it can be made to third parties to perform, to effect those impacts on the beneficiaries. So if we look at the numbers, in order to get a 1 million rand project budget, based on the 2% of net profit after tax for enterprise development and socio-economic development, you need to be targeting a company that has a net profit after tax of 50 million rand. Okay, that gives you 1 million rand worth of project funding. And then if you look at from the skills development side, let's assume that a company with 50 million rand net profit after tax has got 500 employees on their payroll. That equals to the 2.5% of 500 is 12 persons. And so the average cost of a learnership, apprenticeship, or internship program, we estimate that to be 75,000 rand based on the training costs plus a stipend, etc. That gives you a 900,000 rand budget for skills development. And you put those two together and you've got a 1.9 million rand total budget. And then if you just target a slightly larger company with a net profit after tax of 100 million, then you end up having a total project budget of 3.8 million rand. So what are these projects? what can these projects look like in reality and in a way that our conservation people are used to seeing conservation projects. So we're just looking at an example based on a 50 million rand net profit after tax sized company. So you've got your total budget there of 1.9 million rand, broken down between the skills development component, the 900,000, and the enterprise development, socio-economic development, 500,000 rand each. Then you have project overheads. So you would have an administration fee for whichever entity is managing this project, and some other overhead costs. These are examples. It could be other things, but there's the scope. We're just trying to illustrate that there's a scope for a reasonable management fee per project. And then if you take the balance of the total 1.9 million less the project overheads, it gives you the component budgets for each of those different components down to as 1.687 million, and that broken down in the same ratio as the 900, 500, 500 gives you 799, 443, and 443 in terms of your budgets for those different components. And then if we take an example of, let's take our total skills development budget there. So you could then break that down into training, providing training for community members in a community conservation area for 319,000 rands worth of training. You could pay some stipends to support them through that training process. You could have budget for learning material, and you could provide ongoing mentorship, or you could break those sub expenses down in any way that you'd like to. Then when it comes to socio-economic development, let's say, for example, there's a lot less guidelines on how you spend the socio-economic development funding. But so let's say you run 8 environmental education camps for youth in that community, and you donate bird books and posters and binoculars to a local library or a school library, and you take guided day trips into the stewardship reserve for community groups, and that could be your spend there. And then when it comes to enterprise development, basically there you're trying to help small businesses in that community to become more established and develop the skills and experience base that they need in order to be to go out and get other work in the open market. And so these are just a set of example expenses that you could incur in a project spend that's doing invasive alien clearing, making a fence or repairing a fence, and building footpaths and bird hides to do AV tourism, for example, in a important bird area. If that so it all depends on what the environmental assets are in the area that you're trying to conserve. So when it comes to targeting corporates for this, I think it's important. What we need to bear in mind that you need for a reasonable project budget that's going to provide enough management overheads for the organisation to actually sustain themselves and have a person in the field to manage and implement these projects. We'd want to look at a bigger net profit after tax of greater than 50 million rand. You need to seek corporates or industries that have a direct link with conservation, because you want to build these good stories, these rich stories that help to build the brand. For example, the example of health science and access to natural areas. You want to look for companies with a local footprint, because it's also about building relationships and connections, but also those bonus points are available if you're able to absorb the people that you invest the training in into the company down the line. And yeah, then depending on, okay, I'm in trouble now with the last slide. Depending on the nature of the business of the company, that's the measured entity that's giving the funding, they could then they could invest. They could get additional points for the supplier development component, which we haven't gone into here. And then again, this is looking for. The aim is to build a long-term partnership with a local corporate, because that BEE spend is an annual spend that they have to make every year for as long as that company is in business, and wants to retain a BEE level that allows them to be effective in their respective markets. Thank you.